Well, this game is over. It's March 26, 2007, and we're in Detroit, where fans are already headed for the exits because with just over a second remaining, the Pistons trail the visiting Denver Nuggets by 3 points. The Nuggets have possession and just need to inbound to end this game with a road victory. Before these 1.5 seconds elapse, we should see what this result will mean for two teams having difficult transition years, and, I don't know, maybe game out the very, very, very slight chance that this leads to something weird. Let's rewind. For the Pistons, the stakes aren't terribly high here. It's late in the regular season, and they've got the best record in the Eastern Conference. That's been the expectation this decade. Detroit has consistently finished at or near the top of the East, and they ran all the way to an NBA championship in 2004. With the playoffs fast approaching, these Pistons are on track to contend yet again. But look around the floor and you'll see these aren't the same old Pistons. There's someone missing. To understand why, begin with the coach. This isn't Larry Brown, who coached the Pistons to that 2004 title. It's Flip Saunders, who took over after Brown and the Pistons had a sudden, unfriendly divorce in 2005. In Season 1 under Coach Saunders, the Pistons posted their best ever NBA record and survived a grueling second-round series against rising star LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Only the retooled Miami Heat could stop the Pistons in the Eastern Conference Finals. Not a bad first season for Coach Saunders, but this is Detroit. Merely reaching the Eastern Conference Finals constituted a step back from 2004 and 2005. And it wasn't just that Detroit failed to win the East, it was how they lost and the personnel involved. Brown's Pistons drew acclaim for their offensive balance. Unlike their rivals, each headlined by a star or two, Detroit had a core four of Chauncey Billups, Rip Hamilton, Tayshaun Prince, and Ben Wallace. And the addition of Rasheed Wallace made it 5. Sheed's long and illustrious Hawks career reached its end with an 2004 deadline trade to Detroit, the key final ingredient of a champion. None of these guys was known as the clear-cut offensive star. That said, the Detroit offense at the time wasn't particularly, good. Brown's Pistons won big by defending. And while everyone chipped in to that defensive excellence, Detroit had a pretty obvious centerpiece on that side of the floor. The center, Ben Wallace. Undrafted, undersized, yet unrelentingly tough, the 4-time Defensive Player of the Year became Detroit's most recognizable, most beloved face, the incredibly rare superstar who cultivated fame and renown without scoring. Big Ben is among the greatest ever at hustling, rebounding, and protecting the rim, but genuinely inept with the ball in his hands, a perfect embodiment of what made the Larry Brown Pistons such a unique champion. Well, Flip Saunders is not Larry Brown. Last season, Saunders employed a similar rotation to his predecessor, but extracted from it a much more efficient offense. Detroit moved the ball better, they attempted more threes, and they won even more, although not always happily. Ben Wallace wasn't quite as comfortable with this new coach, and he expressed as much, refusing to check into a game late last season. That tension only strained during the 2006 conference final loss to Miami, when Flip diminished the role of Detroit's biggest star, gradually at first and then all at once. Saunders benched Wallace for the entire fourth quarter of the decisive Game 6 defeat. Big Ben was not pleased, and his displeasure percolated at a critical juncture: unrestricted free agency. This past summer, Detroit's fan-favorite superstar spurned the Pistons to sign with the division rival Chicago Bulls, citing his rift with Coach Saunders as one reason for the change. And while the Pistons have stayed winners without Big Ben, Coach Flip isn't done battling Wallace's. If Ben Wallace was the defensive heart of the champion Pistons, Rasheed Wallace was, I don't know, their offensive mouth? Sheed's creative talent, defensive versatility, his verve, his confidence, his cheer, his overall Sheedness felt like the key ingredient that made those Pistons a champion, not just a contender. So excellent, so instrumental was Rasheed Wallace that a stern coach like Larry Brown could tolerate some of the eccentricities Sheed also brought to the table. Well, that part isn't going so hot with Brown's successor. Just like the recently departed Wallace, this Wallace has bristled at Coach Saunders, and vice versa. Sheed's tendency to walk away from huddles, his penchant for technical fouls, and his occasional late arrival to practice, they're all familiar habits, but not to Saunders. Wallace rode the bench for some crunch time this season, and even lost his starting spot for a couple games. Sheed just served a league suspension because he racked up too many technicals. All this was enough for ESPN reporter Chris Sheridan to describe the relationship between coach and star as hate, which led to Wallace screaming at Chris Sheridan. So let's sum it up. The Pistons really aren't the Pistons anymore in terms of personnel, but they're still the best team in the East. Still a hopeful contender to outlast the Cavs, Bulls, and Heat, and maybe even the best of the West come playoff time. But doing the above might require a little more harmony than they've experienced of late. For now, this loss isn't going to be the end of the world. This matters a lot more to Denver, the likely victor. In fact, you can tell Denver coach George Karl is extra desperate because when the Nuggets got possession, he called timeout to draw up a play, up 3 points with under 2 seconds remaining. Totally unnecessary, but it's not unlike Karl to keep coaching right up to the buzzer, for better and worse. At Madison Square Garden in December, Denver had themselves a win even more guaranteed than this one. The Nuggets led the Knicks by 17 points with under 2 minutes to play. Knicks coach Isaiah Thomas waved the white flag and commenced garbage time by benching his best players. Karl, for whatever reason, did not follow suit. With nothing left to play for, their victory a foregone conclusion, Karl let 4 Nugget starters keep playing, including Denver centerpiece / NBA leading scorer Carmelo Anthony. Coach Thomas took that Nuggets lineup as an affront and called for an intentional hard foul, which led to a fight, which led to Melo getting a 15-game suspension of what was shaping up to be his best season. That was a huge blow to a perfectionist coach, to a young player trying to enter the upper echelon, and to a franchise looking to improve on last season's division win. And the surprise twists kept coming. Almost immediately after that fight, during the multi-week absence of their superstar, Denver made a very important trade, acquiring another one of the league's best and most ball-dominant scorers, Allen Iverson. Iverson gave Denver enough juice to tread water during Carmelo Anthony's absence, but Melo returned in late January, and the Nuggets haven't quite coalesced since. They dipped below 500 for parts of February and March, a period that included a horrid loss to these Pistons earlier this month. An Iverson-Melo pairing risks nights like tonight. The Nuggets will win this game in spite of their 2 superstars. Both Iverson and Melo shot poorly, and they've committed 7 combined turnovers. Denver holds the edge tonight thanks to their depth. J.R. Smith blazing off the bench, the Marcus Camby-Nene frontcourt tandem healthy and productive at the same time, that's all great. But yeah, this situation remains novel and unsettled. One superstar who sat for a month, another who arrived in the interim, a very intriguing pairing that still hasn't won much. And all of this stems, at least in part, from Coach Karl's reluctance to ease off the gas in an already decided game back in December. So, now the Nuggets need every win they can get, which I guess is why Karl, still reluctant to ease off the gas, just called a timeout to prolong this distinct but also seemingly already decided game. Unusual choice, maybe overthinking things, but whatever. The Nuggets just need to get the ball in, watch time expire, and go home with a nice victory. This pass isn't looking very clean, but it's not like it really matters with so little time. Okay, well, so I just realized who's standing right here. One thing real quick, just in case. So, super long shots at the final buzzer have gone in before. Like, the 04 Pistons had a famous one of their own. Julius Erving beat the Mavericks in '86 with a shot from beyond half court, but the Sixers got to inbound the ball themselves on that one. Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf did the same thing for Denver a few years later, but he had much more time to dribble and line up his shot than the Pistons would here if they somehow get the ball. So this is different. If this little poke jars the ball free, Detroit would have to get a steal, turn around, and fire a game-tying attempt of, 60 feet in about 1 second. That is basically impossible. It's like a trick shot. But this right here is Rasheed Wallace. We know he's great, we know he's a champion, and we know he's a little grouchy sometimes. But what we haven't yet mentioned is that Sheed is the NBA's king of trick shots. Perhaps more than anyone else in, the history of pro basketball, Rasheed Wallace practices absurd and difficult shots. We recently got to see behind-the-scenes film of this. Sheed can hit threes with both hands at the same time. He can score from behind the backboard. He can thread the ball onto the super narrow carriage of a ball rack. And he can hit from pretty incredible distance. And it's not just idle practice time. Before a game, when you're supposed to, warm up for the game, Sheed will do something like this, the rare shoot-around moment worthy of SportsCenter. Note the left hand.
Probably going to shoot during the game. Rasheed Wallace, one right, one left.
Even during a game itself, Sheed might bust out something silly. Here he is attempting a lefty three-pointer for no reason at all. This is a competitive game in its third quarter with plenty of time on the shot clock. Sheed just felt like pulling a trick out of the bag, and he airballed it. So, I don't know. It almost certainly doesn't matter, but I just felt compelled to point that out. If you had to pick one person on the planet to take an impossible circus shot, it might very well be this guy standing inches away from a developing turnover. This game is all but decided. Up 3 with about a second left, this strange new Nuggets squad should be able to grab a much needed win off the best team in the East, albeit one that's undergone some pretty big changes of its own and not always happily. If this goes the way it should, it's just a regular game. If something weird happens, then, well, welcome to a moment in history.
And Rasheed from long range.
Oh! Yes! 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 Yes!
If you're wondering, the Pistons did indeed go on to win in overtime. And if you're here for more buzzer beaters, I have many more Rewinder episodes to show you.